All right, firstly, Coach, we've had an opportunity to see Canada play two games at the World Cup. I just wanted to know your general thoughts of what you've seen in terms of the quality of play and just being at this FIFA tournament for the first time in over 3 decades.
Well, I think they've done very well. I mean, all things considered, I think they've come out in both games and played on the front foot. Arguably, one could say maybe that wasn't the right strategy, but I think you can't fault them for coming out and showing the right mindset. I think at times, again, you're playing some quality opposition, some quality world class players, and it just simply shows. And again, there's no issues or when you think about some of the results that have come their way, it's based on two quality teams with a lot of different experiences, and I think that's kind of what done them in the end. I think obviously a lot has been said about the so-called poking the bear. I think obviously, John will probably be, and he has been the first one to say, it's a little bit of an own goal on his fault on his part. But that's a lesson. That's a lesson to be learned, and understanding a little bit more about Croatia. That they thrive on those sort of scenarios. So overall, I think so far they've shown them well and show that they do, which is true. They can compete with anyone in the world stage, and they've done that. So looking forward to see what happens in the Morocco game.
Mhm. And tell me a little bit, Coach, about the journey that Alfonso has had since, arriving in Canada. I know he was in Edmonton when he first arrived. He did so well, eventually ending up at Vancouver. The journey that he's had, coming over to North America and just being the poster boy for Canada.
Yeah, obviously, he when I had left the club by then, and he was there, but a lot of the people that I know, and some are still there, talked about this young man who just loved to play, loved to play, and I think there's a lot of stories about him kind of playing with the first team, and then literally next day showing up for his U18 training session and wanting to play, and that's been well documented as well. He's just a really humble young man who wants to continue to do well. To see his journey and to see how far he's come, I think is remarkable. But more importantly, it's an inspiration. And he keeps on speaking about that. It's an inspiration for players all through Canada who have the same sort of journey, come to Canada, who've been embraced by the country and obviously loves the game. So yeah, obviously continue wishing much success, and he'll continue to be the face of Canada soccer for years to come.
And Coach, when you look at, the youth that is in the squad right now with Alfonso at 22, Liam Miller 23, Tasia McKinnon also 23 as well, and the likes of Kone, who is just 20 as well, Liam Fraser 24. In a sense, could you say it's setting the stone and the building blocks for 2026 when these guys will be in their mid to late 20s and could be at their physical peak by then?
Yeah, and I think the likes of Miller and St. Clair obviously playing in MLS and playing at a decent level, and more importantly, getting regular minutes week in week out will bode well. And then obviously, the competitions that are with Nations League and Gold Cup, they're going to be set up in such a way that allows for them to continue to grow. I think the key will be, what that next sort of players come in to supplement those guys will look like. But overall, I think, truth be told, I think the entire region is looks well, especially with those three countries hosting. I think they look well, and obviously, it'll put some pressure on us, Jamaica, to make sure that obviously we have the right players in place and the right plan in place to qualify for this World Cup. But I think CONCACAF has equipped themselves well, regardless of the results. I think we've equipped ourselves well at this World Cup. But again, there's a huge gap that still needs to be closed. But I think kind of the region is well on their way.
And Coach, just putting your Jamaican hat on for a little bit, as you know, the Jamaican diaspora in Canada is huge, just like the UK as well. Do you feel like Canada being in the World Cup will perhaps inspire a few Canadian-born players with Jamaican heritage to deck out for Canada, or we still might have opportunities where some Canadian-born guys might look the way of Jamaica in the future as well?
Yeah, I always say this. It's a really good question. I think, I always say, well, Italian Canadians or Chinese Canadians or Asian Canadians, um, you know, they you open your household where you not really, because when you come home and you really come home to your Jamaican roots when you walk through the door. So it never changes, right? Like everything you do, you come in. And so that affiliation and that connection is strong. And it's hard for people to kind of understand. But you live in a country, but your culture is your culture. And so a lot of the kids and the families that I run into, it's amazing, especially in places like obviously in Scarborough, Brampton East, their affiliation, they would, I think they've kind of left both kind of opportunities open. I think what's been interesting now is a little bit, at one point, it used to be kind of said, well, if you can't play for Canada, if you can't play for you kind of go play for Jamaica. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think actively players are pursuing the opportunity to come and look at their dual nationality, and that's everywhere. That's not just obviously Jamaican, Canadians. I mean, that looks everywhere, that across the globe, people are looking at the opportunity of where they can kind of represent and what's the best fit for them from a professional standpoint as well. So to your point, I think it's going to be interesting to see. But I do know there's a lot of Jamaican Canadians that are interested on both the male and female side of things. And I would say this: the Jamaican diaspora, the parents who have left for Jamaica, if they had their choice, it would only be one, and that would be to represent Jamaica all the time, because I think those conversations are always quite interesting. So people leave, but they never forget their roots.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting the next couple of years to see what kind of transpires on that end.
Yeah, and finally, from my end, coach, as it relates to John, he's been in the job for a couple of years now, did some great work with the women, like we spoke with Tiffany Cameron and others that are now national players for Jamaica. For you, does he perhaps get that opportunity for 2026 as well, continuing that building block as well?
I think so. I think it's the one thing above everything else, and having obviously he's gone to the World Cup with the women's side, but he hasn't gone with the men, and it's I wouldn't say slightly different. I think the preparation, everything behind the scenes is very similar. But as the saying goes, you don't know what you don't know. And the reason why there's only been 8 countries, there's one on the men's side, 5 on the women's side. There's a certain amount of experience that goes into these, outside of talent, which we all know, but there's a certain things that go around with players, or sort of countries rather, and players who have a familiarity with what it takes to get to the next round. And I think what's been really interesting through this process is to see some really young teams taking those next steps and growing before our eyes. And so I think as far as John's concerned, he will continue to grow, and the group will continue to grow, and he's a meticulous planner. And I think he'll have some introspection, which will mean he'll kind of go back and understand and take sort of that sort of responsibility and things where he and his staff can improve. And I think there's only onwards and upwards for them, because I think they'll look at opportunity of this experience and only grow for it. So yeah, I think it's like I said, it'll be very interesting in the next few years. But I've no doubt that they'll continue to improve in the region, and be sort of better equipped for the next World Cup for sure.